She leads the GIS certificate program there and offers GIS courses across multiple campuses. She arrived at CMC in the fall of 2020. Oh my goodness. After working in GIS for 10 years and earning her PhD in geography from San Diego State and UC Santa Barbara, California schools. That's where I went to. Not those schools, but California. Her research focuses on geoprivacy, and she was a 2019-2020 American Geographical Society Ethical Geo Fellow. We also have joining us is Dr. Rafael Moreno, who has a BS in forestry, along with from the Universidad Autónoma in Tapingo, Mexico. He got in 1982, and then he got 2 of his other degrees, his master's and PhD at Colorado State University, so he's one of our own. He's currently an associate professor in the Department of Geography and Environmental Sciences at University of Colorado, Denver. Teaches courses in GIS, technology, environmental science, land use planning, sustainable management, and he leads the free and open source software for geospatial applications lab at CU Denver. And then we have Greg Newman joining us, who's a research scientist at the Natural Resources Ecology Lab here at CSU. He's a co-founder and director of CitSci.org, which is a global citizen science support platform. And he does a lot of different things with decision support systems and platforms for CitSci, citizen science, community science, and participatory research. And most recently was teaching the graduate course in GIS here at CSU. So I asked each of the panelists to prepare a short presentation about, a few minutes long, and then I thought we would open it up for discussion. So I didn't really set an agenda here for who should go first. So Dara, I'm going to call on you. How's that? And you should be able to share your screen.
That sounds great. Here, I'll just share my screen and we'll be off. All right, can everyone see? Great. So I thought I'd introduce us all a little bit to the Colorado Mountain College GIS program first. And so I know that some of my students are in attendance today, and that's great to see. So the Colorado Mountain College system is comprised of 11 campuses throughout our Rocky Mountain region. And the GIS courses are offered at a home base here in Leadville, but also in Steamboat Springs and in Spring Valley. So these also happen to be our residential campuses. And at CMC, we offer a foundational GIS certificate, an advanced GIS certificate, and also serve students in the Sustainability Studies Bachelor and the Ecosystem Science Associates, and soon to be bachelor's degree as well. And another program that we support is the Rocky Mountain Land Management Internship, where students work in an internship with the Forest Service and especially do a lot of GIS work there as well. So overall, our campus has 6 courses in GIS, and I'm the sole GIS faculty here. And as Mel said earlier, this fall I began my position here. My predecessor had set up a very nice program, and we have been working to expand from our 3 campuses where we offer GIS to the full 11 over time, hopefully. So that's a big feat. And of course that includes a lot of remote learning that led us to be pretty well set up for when COVID hit. But I do want to go into some of the approaches that we have, not only for spreading GIS education among our very widespread campuses, but also how we approach some of the remote instruction during COVID. So the first challenge that we hit when we try to expand GIS remotely is software and hardware issues. So like many of you, I'm sure you make great use of the Esri educational license that offers 1-year GIS student licenses that students can install on their computers. Of course, the challenge with this is that many of our students don't have laptops that can necessarily support the Esri licenses. So one of the things that's worked well here has been to have funding for a set of loaner laptops with ArcGIS and QGIS and other programs installed. And so we've seen a big increase in the amount of our laptops that get loaned out for the duration of the semester. But it really does help our students be able to continue to take GIS and to be able to interact and troubleshoot with the software as they go through. I've also turned a lot of our attention to using our geoprocessing tools in ArcGIS Online and in Cardo. Of course, the advancement of these tools has increased over the past few years, and as long as we can stomach the credits in ArcGIS Online, we can continue to offer students a way to conduct some more complex spatial analysis than they would otherwise be able to do. I also put a focus on web mapping in Leaflet and in ArcGIS Online, as well as Cardo, so students can continue to work in these ways. In addition to that, I put a lot of focus on students developing an online portfolio of their work, that they can take to their job interviews when they reach that stage. Another feature at CMC that helps us instruct in the age of COVID has been our smart classrooms. We have an interactive video system, IVS, that allows us to teach live courses that show the entire class in Leadville, in Steamboat Springs, and in Spring Valley, so that students can see each other even though they're separated by quite a distance. One way that this works when we do have in-person labs is if we have a contingent of students that's large enough, we can support a teaching assistant on campus who can assist in troubleshooting when we get to that stage. We also have a program just set up this week, actually, where we offer embedded GIS tutoring for the different courses. So we've got an excellent tutor who, so if students are having some kind of problem at home, they can pop into the room with the tutor, and our great assistant can help them troubleshoot, which, of course, as many of us know, is one of the challenges in teaching GIS. Another aspect that we take advantage of is GIS outdoors. So sending students outdoors as much as possible. Of course, with our partnership with the programs in sustainability and in ecosystem science, this is already a big component of their studies. So I teach this semester a GPS course, and those students have spent quite a lot of time doing original data collection in Avenza with Trimble units and with ArcGIS Collector. And they are taking soil samples, rock samples, water quality samples, and bringing that into the classroom as an immersive experience. And another adjustment that we think about when we're teaching GIS during the pandemic is, should we focus on immersive activities in mapping COVID-19, so in mapping business closures and mapping hospital capacities. And so my predecessor in the spring spent a lot of time on this, and I think it was very enriching for the students to be able to do something that made everything seem a little less helpless. And so the students had good experience with that. But I also think it can be helpful for all of those GIS student projects if they're not COVID related. So typically my approach is to leave it up to the students what kind of topic they want to pursue. And I noticed that this semester, no one picked a COVID related topic. And I think in some ways our GIS projects can be a respite from the stress of what's going on right now. And so if the students are losing themselves in a non-related topic, so a lot of my students work with the Forest Service, and so many of them chose to look at the influx of recreators to sites, and looking at dispersed camping, looking at trash collection and things like that. And that can be very helpful for them and also take their minds off the stress of what's going on. So those are a few things that have worked at Colorado Mountain College. And I just want to say thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to hearing some of the tips from my fellow panelists.
Thanks so much, that was great. Next, let's switch to Rafael. You're up.
All right, thank you, Melinda, and thank you again for the invitation to be here today. I really appreciate it. It's always be back to Colorado State. That has a big place in my heart. I want to be there on campus soon. So it's good to see you guys. And let me show you here my slides. I think a lot of the things that I will say are mirror of what Dara just mentioned. So I think we are all working along the same lines. Let me be sure that you guys can see this. Let me see. Can you see this in full screen now? Okay, great. So again, many of the things that I will mention are very similar to what Dara just described, and it's great to hear. And I probably is by design. I mean, I'm sure it's by design that we have a diversity of institutions, right? So the Mountain College and CU Denver and CSU. In our university, we have a large population of non-traditional students and usually commuters, and mostly at the undergrad level. And so we have a different group of students. So again, today more than ever, the well-being of our students is the highest priority in terms of, being safe physically, emotionally, financially, and academically, right? And we have emphasized these things like we are all doing, and the student support services offices, that we have many, as you can see on the list there, they have gone extra mile and extra hours to be sure that they're reaching out to students and touching base with those that are having all kinds of problems. Many of them have families, right? And so they're trying to take classes while they take care of the schooling of children in the house at the same time. So it's very, very challenging. And so that's something that they have been reaching out and doing extra work on that. Also, there has been fundraisers that are targeted towards providing money for home internet, fixing laptops or renting laptops, as well as loss of income. So there have been fundraisers for that. And then we have the Links Food Pantry, which is our food pantry on campus that has been collected donations, and several students have to reach out to there for many different reasons. So that's good to be able to support them. Of course, the tech support has been working also extra hours in terms of providing training, workshops, online teaching resources, design of materials, all these kinds of things that makes our lives easier, and is really appreciated because sometimes we are not very savvy about some of the online tools. And so they have a help desk that has been helping us extra hours and also giving us workshops of try this in Canvas and try this in Jamboards and mix Canvas with Jamboards and all these kinds of things, which I have never heard before, such as Jamboards. That was news to me. So then we have also, and more specifically, we have in our campus, our GIS lab put together. This is during regular times, but now it added a few more people to the tutors group and to the consultants group so that they can support students more. In terms of tech support, also they are providing now services that they didn't used to do. So more like problems with the computers at home that they wouldn't have in the lab. We have computer loaners also. And also they deployed remote access or expanded the remote access to the lab to be able to help students that have computers with low specs, and so they can run all their work in the lab remotely. So in terms of trying to keep community building and student support, the department as well as the graduate programs organized social Zoom meetings, games, game night, all these kinds of things to try to minimize loneliness, depression, those kinds of things. And also meetings for casual chats. Let's just get together and talk about whatever, GIS related or not, right? So that's something just to keep people engaged, because they feel robbed of the experience, right? It's like, oh, I got in, to the most exciting part of my life, and now I have to do it remotely. So also we do, like Dara was saying, out there, outdoors hikes with limited size groups, field work. We try to emphasize that. The other thing that we're doing, and we do it COVID or not COVID, more than ever, is just emphasize the issue of personal responsibility and ownership of their education to the students. That's something that we all do, but remind them that, in times of crisis is a good opportunity to grow, mature, have a different perspective in life and as well as in university. And so we just remind them, why are we in here? What are we doing, right? And also in terms of academic dishonesty, well, again, you don't want to graduate with half a brain. So we just remind them to be sure that don't do piggyback on people and do your work. Don't kick the can down the road because consequences grow. Just the same old spiel that we all do to the students, just emphasize them. And I think they react very positively to this, when we give them responsibility and treat them like grown-ups, they react very nicely. So grading, yeah, this has been one of the things, right? Oh my God, everybody might be copying or not, but that's why, as Dara was saying, also more lab work. Let's wait to the tests, right? And more weight to the lab work, to the projects, to the in-class presentations, to the teamwork. And again, I was very pleased to see that you mentioned online professional portfolios. I think we're all pitching that activity. And then increased teamwork, presentations in the small breakout rooms, and again, try to promote social interactions, try to reduce risk of feeling isolated, active learning so they don't get bored. It's very hard to sit for 1 hour to listen to somebody online, and even in person is hard. Online is much harder. So try to do active learning so that they can share in small groups, and this helps with the socializing as well as the learning, and try to make up for the casual interactions on the whole. So in terms of test, try to put questions that are more analysis and synthesis questions, and try to reduce memorization. And again, this is not particular to COVID, it's just to emphasize the thing. Some of the silly tricks, Canvas that does the shuffling of things just in case, right? And then we don't use Proctorio for all kinds of reasons. It's just, and it has been a big discussion, and I guess in all campuses, the discussion is going around about the use of Proctorio. Also, in terms of support of the students, here is important to mention, and I should have mentioned it. We have a fantastic GIS librarian at our library, same as CSU. I know that Diane Fritz is our GIS librarian, and I know they talk to the CSU folks and CU Boulder, and I think all over the state. She has been an awesome resource also because she has been basically a support element for the students for getting data and all kinds of things that is part of her work usually, but now it's more important during these times. All right, and I think that's all for me. Thank you very much.
Excellent, thanks so much, Rafael. Greg, you're up next.
Yeah, thanks. These are fantastic, and I have very similar experiences, and I'll try to walk you through. What did I just do? Stop sharing, wrong screen. Give me a second. Share screen, let's try this screen. That would be better. Okay, here we go. Yeah, this is great. Really great to learn from you all about how to continuously engage students throughout this pandemic in GIS. And I love Dara's point about GIS as a distraction. I think that's really keen. I think our students this semester have been fantastic, and they've been really engaged in their own research, and that's helped them try to take the world away from their stress. which has been helpful. So bear with me. I got to open up a presentation that seems to be taking forever. So hold on. Here we go. So yeah, I have some similar thoughts and tips, and I'd love to, I'm eager to have a deeper conversation after these short presentations with all of you. Okay, bear with me here. All right, so let's see, hopefully this, bear with me. I'm trying to get this to load up here. Okay, there we go. And it's on the wrong screen. Can you guys see that? Okay. Is that all right? Cool, okay. All right, so yeah, so I wanted to see if I can't play this, if I can, maybe not. Yeah, where did my little video go? I didn't like it, okay. I have an animation of COVID cases, and it's all by county. And I wanted to just show that obviously we're living in a pandemic, and of course they can't get this to load, and I don't know why. I presented this just the other day in class just to say, hey, you know, what's a good map, and how do we look at these data spatially, and how do we look at, are we looking at land? This is election, 2016 election, not the 2020 election. And you know, are we looking at these by area? Are we looking at this by number of voters, electoral votes? And so just to get people thinking about, and as we open up today, you know, what makes a good map? How do we present data spatially matters, data visualization matters. And so our GIS class in the graduate level focuses on, I'll start out with a little background about this class, challenges we've encountered during the COVID-19 pandemic, benefits of the pandemic. We often focus on the challenges, but there we actually have seen a little bit of some benefit with respect to, and I'll touch on that, just interaction and asynchronous nature of stuff, and then how we adapted and how we tried to create some solutions. So background, NR 505 is a graduate GIS class, really conceptualized by Melinda initially, and I've stepped in over the last 3 years to teach this class. It's focused on GIS and research. It's very applied, it's very hands-on, it's very akin to the sustainability bent that Dara mentioned at CMC. It's very natural resource focused in general, hence the NR prefix, and it's very group project focused, and labs have been transformed this year, which added to our challenge as a team to try to figure out, we originally had labs written in ArcMap, and we've shifted them over to ArcPro. And the labs also include labs on QGIS, R, and Python. And so we had a lot of work to do because we were adapting to the pandemic real time and transforming some labs at the same time. So it was a bit of a behemoth mountain to climb, but we got through it. And we just chose to end up being 100% virtual for this course in both a synchronous and asynchronous mode for 2020 fall semester. And we did that by design because things were evolving and changing literally as the pandemic unfolded. And so we wanted to offer a cafeteria style approach for our students to engage in NR 505, whether they could actually attend all sessions. We have very lengthy sessions. A lab was originally scheduled Mondays 2 to 6, and lecture was 2 to 4 on Wednesday. So Monday and Wednesday course time, and that's quite challenging. And so everybody's schedules were shifted. Some were in person, most were virtual. So we wanted to offer a cafeteria style approach for students should they have conflicts with other courses that were in person or synchronous online. So if an hour during that 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. session, that lab session on Monday didn't work for them and they had to jump off and go to another class, we wanted to be as accommodating as possible to those student situations to alleviate stress for them and accommodate diverse schedules. So we offered this in both asynchronous and synchronous. And so what I did is I was able to have synchronous sessions where my TA and I led the labs on Mondays 2 to 6, and I led lecture 2 to 4 on Wednesday. But we also posted modularly recorded videos of these sessions in 20-minute segments on Canvas and accessible so that if a student missed a section, they could go in by topic and get that topic on projections or on, buffering or on, slope aspect, whatever the topic was. And so we could do that in very modular short segment recordings of our interactions. And so we made heavy use of Canvas and Zoom to do that. I've been teaching this for the last 3 years. I'm a citizen science, community science, participatory mapping kind of guy with a lot of web mapping focus. So much like Dara, I tend to emphasize things like leaflet and things, but we certainly do a ton in ArcPro. I'd say 2/3 of the labs were ArcPro, 1/3 was more free and open. You know, our QGIS, our Python type stuff. A little background in modeling. I've always used Canvas and Zoom, so that wasn't a big lift. And that seemed to go quite well, and I'll talk about some of those assets. And some challenges. So again, Chase, these upgrades to these labs was a big issue. So for me, as we've gone through the semester, the biggest hurdle was hardware and software, and I loved Dara's slide starting right out of the gate. We always had loaner laptops in person for this 2 to 6 p.m. Monday lab. People would convene at the Michael Smith Natural Resources Building, and they'd come. We'd have this cart, and then if they didn't have the software, they could just check that laptop out and go forth and conquer. And it was right there installed on ready to use in person, and we could, you know, walk through lab and kind of address questions as needed. And that was sorely missed, of course, not being in person. So what was really the challenge for us was we tried to have folks be able to do what's called a remote desktop into this remote lab. And that was a huge monumental catastrophe, if you will, at the beginning of the semester, because we had all kinds of issues with remote desktop logins, access to the software, the laptops, the servers that had the software, and then the saving of files and output were problematic because they tried to open up these spaces for like read-write permissions so they could save outputs of their geoprocessing tools, and then it would block that. So that was by and large my biggest COVID frustration was hardware and infrastructure. And I relied heavily on the Warner College of Natural Resources IT, and they helped tremendously, but it was a challenge and remained so for the first couple of labs. And that kind of put us at a bit of a disadvantage, but we came through it. And then of course, 90% of our students are Mac based. And so installing, it's great to get the Esri license, but then how do they do that on a virtual VM within their Mac? And that's a pain in the neck. And so that was certainly presented challenges. Most of those students opted to use the remote desktops, which had their own problems. So we made it through. Everybody was smiling, but with first couple of sessions were a bit tricky that way. And of course, our students come to this class with diverse backgrounds in GIS, some having very little to no GIS background, and some having taken several courses. So that, as always, is a challenge and is no different in COVID than in an in-person world. Zoom recording storage limit. So on Canvas, our Canvas de facto class sessions, our little sections for our classes, have X amount of storage, and these Zoom recordings started to fill that up very, very quickly. And I'll talk in a second about how I got around that. There are some benefits though. This asynchronous synchronous modality turned out to be very enjoyable for everyone and very fruitful because it gave a great flexibility to students in a time of need for flexibility. And I would say that offering this as asynchronous and synchronous ended up being a huge benefit because students could actually drop in and drop out. Some graduate students were a TA in another course and they could go be that TA and then drop back in and not fear that they missed anything because we had these modular recordings right there ready for them. And I literally posted them every night right after these sessions. So they were right there ready in case they missed any of the synchronous session. So that offered more flexibility to accommodate different life scenarios and situations, which we saw many of, and given the unfortunate nature of the pandemic. And it also allowed greater flexibility for students interested in other courses that had conflicts when compared with their in-person schedules. So how did we adapt to these challenges and what kind of solutions did we come up with? I'll start first with adaptations and then I'll go to solutions. And we clearly needed to be flexible at the start of class, given the complications with our remote server access and ArcGIS online access. And all of that as always, we got through it and students were able to make it work. We ended up kind of creating a best practices Google Sheet that we shared for access of the remote servers, and students gave tips to each other, which was really awesome to see peer-to-peer learning. Hey, you know, I have a Mac that's this version and it had this issue and my way of getting around that was this. So that was really great to see that collaboration in that Google Doc. The adaptation of the recordings rather than just one fell swoop recording to that modular took me a little while, but it just really ended up being a great cadence and a huge asset. So people could get to the content they're looking for asynchronously offline, not during the sessions when they needed it. We had to use our announcements tool in Canvas a lot to make frequent announcements and needed to rely more heavily on pre-existing learning resources that might be found online, ArcGIS online for learning modules or what have you. So how did we solve some of these barriers given COVID? I'm a huge whiteboard fan, and I love to get people thinking outside of just the tech, outside of the software, which buttons am I clicking, but to the bigger question of why and so what. And if we don't get our students thinking about why they're doing what they're doing, how they plan to do it, and what's the so what of it, then we're missing an opportunity. So I'm a huge user of whiteboards, and what I was able to do is use Zoom whiteboards, and I like to have flip the model, a flipped classroom where students teach, and so we all learn from each other. And so what I did is I made extensive use of breakout groups. Right from the get-go, we do group projects, and NR 505 is entirely about solving real-world problems. And so we pair with stakeholders. I get a lot of these stakeholders from NGOs using sitsi.org. And I say, hey, like the Left Hand Watershed Center wanted to do some restoration success monitoring, and they had this problem. They have this data that they're collecting, and they wanted to identify areas of impairment in the watershed with respect to, say, invasive plants and overtaking the reseeding that they've been doing since a flood, for example. So I had this stakeholder, and I had a group say, let's pair you with that stakeholder, use your real stakeholder data to do some spatial analyses and actually solve that challenge spatially for that stakeholder. So right from the get-go, we do breakout groups, meaning we have the group projects, and we divide into group projects, and we set these stage, and they pick their stakeholder. We had one working with City of Fort Collins, natural areas, to look at prioritizing areas of lack of proximity to open spaces for marginalized audiences. And so they did some proximity analysis to try to figure out where certain parks could be prioritized to create new parks in areas where there's the lack of access for those people. So we partner with people. Then we had these breakout groups, and I often had them come back and use the Zoom whiteboard to share out a flow chart of how are they planning to run through their geospatial workflows to solve this stakeholders situation. So I asked them to teach more than learn, listen. And so they learned, and then they turned around and taught others. And so I tried to have them be the voice on the Zoom rather than just listening to me talk and talk and talk. So use of Canvas helped a tremendous amount. And when I hit that limit, luckily I'm a web mapping kind of guy, so I have my own web server. So I just threw my Zoom recordings up there and just linked to the recordings as soon as I hit that limit. So that was helpful. And then lastly, I'll just leave you with this, that I want to remember to have our students think about the why they're doing this and the so what, and what are those outcomes, and what are the outcomes for them as a lifelong learner. What are the outcomes for society? How can society be better? How can the City of Fort Collins now decide where to put new parks based on those marginalization metrics? How can conservation outcomes be improved? And how can decision and outcomes be improved? So I want the students to feel agency and empowerment so that when they leave the semester's work over the course of the semester, they do this group project and they put up a little web story map about it. How is the world, how did your work address and actually lead to some of these outcomes in these different sectors? So that's kind of been our emphasis all along and in our 505, and that's all I've got. So I'll stop there.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Greg. That was really great. So what I'd like to do now is open up the conversation to the rest of the group. Again, if you've got questions or would like to ask a question, please type it in chat or in the Q&A down at the bottom of your Zoom screen. With that being said, I'm going to kick things off here. We've got a few minutes to have a little bit of a conversation. And just think about, you really aren't in a stage yet where you can sit back and reflect on this. You're still in the midst of it. So I think in terms of listening to each other's stories, I guess, what are your ideas about next steps you'll make? Because we're going to still be in this situation next semester. And I guess what is like the number one thing that you're going to take into going into this next semester that you've learned from your experience now? And I'll ask Dara first.
One of the things that I really felt was helpful in connecting with my students early on was when they had a GIS project and they were supposed to brainstorm on their own and then brainstorm in groups. But what really set off a connection between professor and student was making sure we had at least a 10-minute consultation one-on-one. What are your interests? What are you talking about? And having that be, if anything, a Zoom meeting. And suddenly there was so much more apparent interest in what we were learning in class, how it would help them pursue their interests, and really helped me learn more about them. And so that would be the number one trick or technique that I would bring into the next semester and probably apply that early on for all my classes.
Rafael, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I think I have always been, I was a little bit, or quite a bit reluctant to the online teaching, and this was a push into the pool. And so now I can see more like Greg was describing, the good and the bad of it, right? And I think there are several aspects that I will say that are good, that we can rescue and continue into the future. And so that's something that I think at the end, COVID or not COVID, is going to facilitate a transition to more remote teaching and learning.
Greg?
Yeah, I love both Dara and Rafael's points. I think we've learned a lot through this pandemic. Everyone has. And I think it comes back to, as Rafael just pointed, there's a lot of learning that happens irrespective of pandemic, no pandemic. And we're learning that relevance, rigor, and relationships, that there's this 3R model of education matters to students. They want to see the relevance of it. They want to see that there's rigor in what they're learning, there's skills learned, and then they want to see the relationships formed. And so it's beyond the skills they've learned. It's now they've actually created a network with stakeholders. They've worked with the Forest Service. They can in their portfolios, they can talk about these experiences. And I think that's often forgotten about, what is, as opposed to the skills they learned. It's these relationships formed that will bring them forward in their careers as well.
So yeah, I was actually just going to ask Beth if she wanted to make any comments. So Beth is not only in the Centroid, our education specialist, but she also teaches the lion's share of the undergraduate classes in our GIS program here at CSU. So Beth, your comments after listening to everyone.
Yeah, I want to kind of echo what everyone else said. Like Greg, when you were talking about all the things that you did for 505, I was like, yep. And then Dara, you were talking about making that connection with students. And I have a class of 86 students right now. We started out with 91, 5 dropped. But with 86 students, like how do you meet one-on-one with 86 students? And many of them were taking the class remotely. I gave people the option because I didn't want to have to make people come in person if they didn't feel comfortable. So I had some people who would come in person and I could see them in class, but the ones who weren't coming in person, I wanted to have a connection with them. And so I had a handful of like Zoom sessions, come on Tuesday night or Monday afternoon, come on to Zoom and let's just chat one-on-one so we can actually talk to try to get that connection. And I only ever had a few people chime in. So in hindsight, I did not make it required. I didn't like specifically email people to make an appointment, but I think next semester, that's one change I might make, is because I think it would make a huge difference to talk to people and get them excited about it at their own level, even though, like Greg, what you were saying about start the semester with the why and the so what, I try to do that. I mean, I don't know if I really hit the mark, but it's so general, you know, for that many people, you need to kind of really get to people individually. So I think I'm going to do that for next semester.
That's great. Thanks. We have a question in the Q&A here. What are some of your favorite tools for promoting active learning and interactivity? I'm thinking about things like menti.com. You know, Greg mentioned whiteboards. Do you all have other things that you might like? This is from Diane Fritz.
Yeah, great question, Diane. I'll just throw my ideas in the hat and let Rafael and Dara add to that hat. I use Poll Everywhere once in a blue moon, and it's a tool you can use for interactive engagement. So that's one that I'd mention, Diane.
I also like Poll Everywhere. I've used Padlet from time to time where students, it's kind of a message board, but you can add video, drawings, interactive diagrams. And I have students play a game where, so if you're familiar with the animal game where you say the name of an animal, then the next person takes the last letter of that animal name and picks a new animal. We play that with different terms in GIS. And so I have students pick ones that they have never heard of before and then go through. And by the time you're at the end of that Padlet, you have a new dictionary where every student learns at least some and teaches us some new GIS term. And that's been pretty cool.
I think I learned the use of Jamboards, Google Jamboards. I have never heard of those, and those are nice because it gets rid of a lot of problems of the whiteboard in Zoom when you have the breakout rooms. And so similar to the tools you guys described, just another option. Yeah,
that's great. You know, I have another question to kind of chew on here, and I think that the university, the institution, is in a transitional stage right now because of the pandemic. And I think these lessons learning in this virtual teaching space are going to inform how the university will be transformed. And so some of your thoughts about what that transformation may look like. And as an example, we have a field class that we have now made virtual. I have problems with that. But, you know, what else do we do? So with that, I'll open it up for a comment.
I was inspired by Dara's get GIS outside. And I think I think there's two parts to your question, Melinda. There's, well, how is the world going to be different? How are universities going to be different post-COVID? And I think if I understood your question right, you know, what does the future look like, I think. And so during the COVID, I certainly have trouble with, I'm an outdoor guy. You know, without being outside, I'm miserable. So I think I wouldn't want a virtual field class. I kind of agree with, I have trouble with that as well. I think given the, you know, the nature of social distancing and whatnot, we had an advantage. So like in the citizen science crowdsourcing, participatory mapping world, you can go solo. And at this age group, it's safe to set people out and on their adventures, so long as they're not in crowded areas. And so I'm very interested in, and our students were interested in, still going to do it. We had field work happening. So like one went down to the San Juans and was collecting camera trap data. And so this is field work still goes on, life goes on, even if you're in the midst of a pandemic, and can, so long as you're sensitive to public health guidelines. So I'd like to suggest that in the future, GIS become more active, meaning outdoors, and more relevant to actual real world situations needing the benefits of GIS. One thing I forgot to mention that I feel remiss in not covering is Google Earth Engine more. I didn't have time to pull anything together on that front, and I feel remiss in not exposing students to GEE much. So, you know, next time.
Well, we're just coming to the end of our session here with you as panelists. I so appreciate you taking the time to present today and be so thoughtful about this very important topic that, you know, and sharing what your lessons learned are, because it's such a valuable environment to be able to understand what's happening. So thank you so much. And now we're going to shift into our next session. Thanks. All right, so on our schedule, our next activity is Speedy Spatial Stories. And we have 4 different spatial stories we're going to hear from. And Dan, I think you're gonna be in charge of Caryn's presentation, correct?
Correct. Yeah, she's not able to make it in person, so she did a pre-recorded presentation for us.
Okay, and I see that Jasmine is here and Dave is here. So we have all 4 people with our Speedy Spatial Stories. And we didn't talk about at all how we're doing this. So I'm just going to suggest that Dan will go first. He'll be followed by the video that he has of Caryn. And then Jasmine, if you would go next, and then Dave. So you just sort of seamlessly do that. Does that make sense to all of you? Can you like give me a reaction thing, maybe clap hands or thumbs up or something? Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. All right, so Dan, take it away.
All right, so load up the presentation here. Awesome. Well, thanks for you all for joining. My name's Dan Carver. I'm working at the Geospatial Centroid. And today I'm going to tell a short story about an apple, a place, and really a pretty great revelation that came from my understanding of the two. So apples are a very important fruit around the world. They're eaten by millions, if not billions of people. And an amazing thing about the domesticated species of apple is that there's over 7,500 varieties of this single species. What might be even more incredible than that is that all those varieties share this common origin within the individual species called Malus severesi. Now, this is a wild apple, and it's one of many wild apples out there. All these apples have been out there growing on the landscape through evolutionary time. And if we look at the whole suite of wild apples, there's between 30 and 40 of these species. And they hold a great deal of diversity that is being used to actively support the development and continued growth of these 7,500 varieties that we rely on for food. And this is true of all the plants that we eat. So there's wild peppers out there. There's also wild carrots and wild squash, all in the native landscape in our country. And I became involved and learned about these species through my engagement with a large project to assess how well these wild relatives were conserved throughout the United States, sunflower being one of the most important ones. And as a geographer, I came to this project with the goal of creating a reproducible methodology that allowed us to take the information we already knew about these species, where they existed on the landscape, and use that to make predictions of where we could expect to find them based on similarities within the habitat. And what was great, we did this for a single species, we were happy with it. We started producing these genus level analysis, and it allowed us to create these useful maps that showed, this is an example of all the wild squash that are native to the United States and Mexico. So it's showing hotspots for biodiversity, which is helping people understand where they can go to collect these species. We then had the great idea to scale this up quite a bit more, to look at all 654 species of these wild relatives that are native to the United States. And we were super happy with the method. It was going together well. We were in our final kind of check stages, looking for errors before trying to push this thing out to publication. And Malus fusca happened. So this apple, this wild apple that's native to the western coast of the United States and Canada, had a single occurrence point that was being dropped. And this was less than 1% of the total of information we had for the species, but it was important because I didn't know why it was happening. I didn't understand where in our workflow this occurrence was being dropped. And that meant that there could be a larger systematic error that's being applied to all the runs, all the iterations of this. This error is hidden beneath the surface. So naturally you start stressing out and you try to troubleshoot, and you start with the easiest places, the minor fixes, and you start working backwards. And I was getting extremely nervous by the time I got back to scripts I wrote 7 months ago, where we were compiling all our data sets from different sources. Because if something was wrong there, we'd have to redo it all. We'd have to start over effectively with our analysis. And it's just nerve-wracking. And lucky for me, my problem was really the base of all good problems. I had made an assumption. And to explain that, let me just show our home here. Here's the Earth, 0 degrees longitude. All right, it runs through England because the folks that started using this put themselves at the center of the map, I guess. If you head to the west, you end up with negative numbers. If you head to the east, positive numbers. And at about 180 degrees east and west, you're on the same line on the surface of the Earth. So we are doing this study only looking at occurrence data in North America. So I made an assumption that all our latitude and longitude values, or longitude values in this case, would be negative. So if there's any positive longitude value, I could just drop it from the analysis. It's from somewhere in the Eastern Hemisphere. Don't need to worry about it. Well, it turns out that Alaska is indeed in the Eastern Hemisphere. So there's this island called Attu, which is in the very eastern or western edge of the Aleutian Island chain. That's 173 degrees east. And on this island, we had a recorded observation of Malus fusca. So the first question that comes to mind is this really a quality observation? This is effectively 2,000 miles from anywhere that we predicted as core habitat. So my initial thought was no, but I wanted to follow up a little bit on this. So I just started looking at pictures of the place. And Attu is mountainous, and it's pretty cold looking. This is very much the tundra and not a place I think of when I think of apple trees. But the more photos I started looking at with this island, I realized there was quite a history here. Something quite substantial had happened on this place, something that had people drawing maps in the 1940s, something involving American soldiers and Japanese soldiers. So Attu Island is really far out there. It's approximately the same distance, 3,200 kilometers, from Tokyo and the capital of Alaska, Juneau. And in 1942, while the World War II war in the Pacific was going on, the Japanese military invaded and overtook a base on this island. They held that base for a year while the US planned to retake it. And not having the aid of computer cartography at the time, all these people are standing around a scale model of the island that someone built, put together to bring, GIS to this group of individuals. So in 1943, the US invaded, 13,000 troops were sent to this island. And after about a month of warfare and the loss of life of 2,000 people from Japanese soldiers and American soldiers, the United States retook this island. They maintained a military base on this location throughout World War II. And then looking through pictures, I came across this one. And it was simply said that they rebuilt the chapel that was on the island. And I looked closely and I read the actual caption for this photo, and it said, "A post-battle Army chapel on the hogback overlooking Massacre Bay, Attu. Soldiers planted the trees, the only ones on Attu." So now here was this evidence that there were trees planted on this island at some point. So I went back to my occurrence data and looked at the additional information about this observation. And it said it was from Alaska, Attu Island, on the hogback in the ACS area, which is the military complex that was built on this location. So this stuck with me for so long that I had this point that very well, this apple, this observation that was just a point on the map for me, could have been planted by these soldiers because there was a war there, because they rebuilt this chapel. And to me, it just iterated this point that we look at this and we can fall into this habit of simply seeing our data as data. But all these points, they have a history. So there's a willingness of someone to go out there and collect it. In the case of this apple occurrence, the fact that a war came to this island was significant for it actually ending up there. And there was the beliefs and values of the people at the time who thought planting trees on an island where trees don't grow was meaningful or significant and worth it. And then there's this biological and evolutionary history of this plant that allowed it to actually be adapted to this location. So you start to see that there's such a rich and full picture associated with this point on the map, this observation. And it really requires you to step out of that lens of geography to see this depth. So the question comes to mind, is there still an apple on Attu? I'd like to believe that there is. You know, in some sense, I feel like I'm this plant's biggest fan. I'm rooting for it up there. But the reality is we're probably not going to know. This island was closed more or less for visitation in 2010. The airstrip closed down. So if you want to go there, it's a 200-something mile boat ride to get to this place. And it's almost better that there's this mystery that it lives on. And what I wanted to leave you all to hear today is just, I hope at some point in the near future, you get the opportunity to feel this sense of mystery that comes out of your own work and really take advantage of that and try to follow it, try to learn, look at it through a different lens. So I think the more we do that as geographers, the more it helps us understand our own work and really helps us appreciate everything that has gone on before us to allow us to do what we do today. So with that, I just want to do a quick thank you for the team. We have a paper coming out in hopefully December, which is highlighting all this great work. And then we'll leave questions, just send an email or contact me through the Centroid. So thanks for that. And then I'll just be jumping into, so Caryn Nezat is a USDA employee who's doing some really great work at being flexible and creative with all the different Esri suite items. So this presentation will showcase how she's engaging with data collection all the way down to actual contact tracing within the USDA. So, and this does have sound, so I will appreciate an acknowledgement that it is running.
Thank you. My name is Caryn Nezat, and I am a GIS analyst with the USDA Partnerships and Data Innovations Group. Today, I'd like to share with you a couple of projects I have worked on this year, starting with battling citrus greening in the Florida citrus groves. Citrus greening, also known as HLB, was first detected in Florida in 2005. It is present globally and devastates groves by reduction in quality and quantity of citrus produced until trees finally die. In 2018, the National Academy of Science reported that research into managing citrus greening lacked broad-scale field trials and centralized data management. Kraft and PDI began collaboration to move lab successes into commercial groves, collect data from those trials, and create integrated data management solutions. Some of those solutions are the online grower application, the application dashboard, the online data portal user guide, a grower's survey, UAV collected data, and the grower's dashboard. The online application allows interested commercial growers to share their information with Kraft. This includes detailed land information, planting practices, their plant management, including fertilizer, irrigation, pest and disease management, proposed experimental designs, a one-year cost analysis, contracts that are associated with their groves, and this allows Kraft to determine the suitability of each commercial grower for participation in the program. The application dashboard is an interactive method of reviewing applications. Sorting can be done by county, variety, planting method, and number of acres. Application details can be edited and exported as needed. The interactive nature of the dashboards means specific criteria can be selected to filter applications and focus on specific growers that meet that criteria. The Kraft Data Portal User Guide was designed to support growers in fulfilling the data entry requirements. Guidance is provided in an easy-to-navigate online format. The guide provides instructions on how to track and enter data. It is separated by section in the grower survey for easy access to information on data collection and entry. Growers can bookmark the instructions and refer to specific sections they need clarification on. It can also be updated and distributed without the need to redistribute a new user guide to all growers. The Growers Survey was created to standardize tracking and data entry of management practices between growers. Growers track all management, including fertilizer applications, pest and disease management, irrigation activities, general grove maintenance, their annual costs associated with experimental test factors, water and soil quality, and harvest yields. Consistency in data collection creates a powerful database that allows Kraft to analyze specific techniques used and determine outcomes of those techniques. The database will be used to guide the citrus industry on best management practices for battling citrus greening. Our partners, Aerobotics, provides UAV collected imagery access through an API. Aerial imagery provides tree-level information that includes NDVI and NDRE metrics of each tree within a grove. The imagery allows time series tracking of the tree data to enhance analyses of the grower's management. Florida Department of Agricultural Consumer Services also uses this data in selecting and tracking 8,000 or more sentinel trees for nutritional analysis and PCR testing for citrus greening. This data further boosts Kraft's ability to correlate specific management to successful outcomes. The Grower's Dashboard provides access to previously submitted surveys for verification of data and reviewing project progress. Visualization of management provides a general overview of inputs and outcomes for a specific grove. Growers can edit surveys, view aerial imagery, and tree-level information for their project. As time goes on, the grower will have access to their nutritional and PCR tests and the time series data within the dashboard. They can use it to adapt management for greater success. Data collected through these tools will serve the scientific community and commercial growers. Data will be used as an educational tool for growers and extension outreach programs. The CRAFT USDA database will be used by the scientific research community to inform decisions on best management practices for battling citrus greening. These tools potentially may also be adapted to study and inform other agricultural crops. Another project PDI has undertaken is the creation of the ARS Check In-Out app. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the USDA sent thousands of employees home to maximum telework. During the last 8 months, the pandemic coordinators have worked with 90-plus locations in tracking and reporting essential staff activity while working on site. In hope to ease the burden of tracking and provide a streamlined contact tracing tool, PDI created a simple method for employees to enter activity and created the dashboard tools for location and area pandemic coordinators to meet the reporting requirements. Communication with locations begins with an informational story map that provides background on ARS Check. Detailed videos to guide users are embedded within the story map, along with contact information for answering further questions. Links are provided to necessary information regarding protocols for dealing with possible exposure and CDC guidance. Thousands of ARS employees are beginning to use ARS Check. This required familiarizing locations with the Survey 123 software and creation of ArcGIS online accounts for every employee. For training employees on how to use ARS Check for contact tracing at work sites, again we use story maps as an online, interactive, and evolving communication tool. Locations from DC to California are able to fulfill reporting requirements to assist in bringing employees back to work. Filling out a survey for contact tracing was designed to be simple, brief, and flexible. Using the Survey 123 Connect, we're able to create data infrastructure that minimized user inputs. Functions such as pull data are used throughout the survey to auto-populate employee names, ID numbers, contact, and location information. Flexibility is necessary to allow supervisors to enter information for sick employees off-site or temporary workers and contractors. A brief wellness check presents individuals with information should they potentially be exposed or at risk of exposure to the virus. Their response is recorded and triggers webhooks to pandemic coordinators and supervisors. Location information can be entered manually or by QR code generated for each location. These codes are track rooms throughout the agency to isolate areas within a building that may have been contaminated. This level of detail allows deep cleaning to be focused on areas of contamination rather than an entire building, saving thousands of dollars. Tracking people encountered also provides information necessary to identify people that may have been exposed and need to quarantine. The simplicity of the ARS Check application means broader adoption throughout the agency, saving time, money, and potentially lives. The power behind ARS Check is the use of dashboards to concisely provide the necessary information to pandemic coordinators. Data collected by employees is visualized and filtered in the dashboard. The ability to customize a date range allows for contact tracing to begin. The number of rooms, employees, work sites, and locations entered is visualized as serial graphs and is integrated with the filter options. When an employee answers yes to the wellness check, pandemic coordinators are able to select that record, identify areas of contamination and affected individuals. The dashboard provides all the necessary information for pandemic coordinators to do their contact tracing and fulfill their reporting requirements. Thank you for allowing me to share some of the projects that PDI has been working on. For more information, you can reach out to the PDI tech team at pditt@usda.gov or Caryn at usda.gov. Thank you.
Great. That was really great. Thanks, Dan. Your talk was excellent. And thanks for the presentation from Caryn. We'll be in touch with her to let her know how much we liked it. It seems that I've lost Jasmine on the, Jasmine, if you're there, please make yourself known. Otherwise, we're going to just go straight to Dave instead. But I don't see her on the list any longer or even in the attendees. I think something might have happened. I don't see a message from her. So with that, maybe she'll come back. Dave, I'm going to go ahead and let you take it away.
Okay, great. Everyone can hear me. Let me get set up here. All right, wonderful. Well, thanks so much, and it's great to listen to other work and talks. Really enjoyed it, and good to see folks. Haven't been around for a little while. So what I was hoping to do today was just to share a bit about some recent work and talk a little bit about some of the platforms, especially Earth Engine, Google Earth Engine. I know it was mentioned a little bit before, so it's kind of a nice segue, if you will. What I also wanted to do was provide this in a little bit of a different format for me, and it gets to, I think, a little bit about sort of the synchronous, asynchronous kind of learning environments that are going on, and that you all are working with at the university. So really, really interesting for me to learn from you all about that. So what I wanted to do was, I'm going to go ahead and try and make this a little bit bigger. The size is a little bit small, but that's okay because you all have access to it. So what I've done is I've posted it up here in my Patreon account, and so you can go to this and take a look at it later on. The basic idea here is, I don't want to exactly read it, but this is a little bit of my story here about this work. And so essentially what I've been doing recently is a fair amount of work in global mapping, global conservation mapping. And so one of the papers that I recently published was about human modification across the globe and looking at both patterns, but also rates and trends in well, the loss of natural land. I think that this is super important, obviously, given climate change and given the rounding around to 2021 and potential likely administration change. I think that we'll all see massive surge of efforts in climate change kinds of research, and of course GIS is so important in that. So what I am hoping to do is really to help inform that work at a big picture. And for me, a lot of climate change work, yes, it's about climate, et cetera, but it's about the way we use our land. And GIS and remote sensing are really powerful tools, obviously, to be able to help understand what those patterns are and those trends and the consequences of those actions, both, you know, adding and subtracting away from these kinds of trends that we have. So what I wanted to do was just highlight a couple aspects of this. So the animation that you see up here, perhaps a little bit small on the multiple screens that we have here, but you can go to it and take a look at it, is the global data set that we pulled together. There's a 1990 data layer, there's a 2015 data layer, and we calculated rates of change across the globe. And so, you know, the bottom line numbers, we found that about 15% of natural lands were lost between 1990, actually an increase in human modification over that time, 15%. So quite rapid. And, you know, and importantly, we found that the rate of that change was increasing the past few years. So, you know, important stuff that really underlies much of the global work, IUCN, sustainable development goals, UN work, and those kinds of things. So a little bit about GIS. So I am using Google Earth Engine predominantly these days, and I did use it for this work. So why? I think three things. And this graphic from Google actually, you know, is a nice summary of it. Basically, I think it's just got this massive data set, right, that are already there. The satellite imagery and the ability to tap that is amazing. It's got an amazing computational platform. There are some algorithms and some approaches that are a little bit more difficult to actually implement, but 95% of my work probably is massively increased in both the speed and really the ability to just sort of think about a project and move with it, and then share that information. So I'll just try to fast forward a little bit here. So we used a massive amount of data. We had 14 primary data sets across the globe. This is at 300 meters resolution, so some big data sets for sure. We leveraged a whole bunch of different data sets. One of the ones that a number of folks might be familiar with here is from the European Union Joint Research Center, and that is the global human settlement layer. And so what I wanted to do is, you know, just illustrate the point that, you know, 30-meter resolution data set globally available, you can instantly, almost instantly tap that information. So this is obviously Fort Collins with that layer of built up area. One of the things that I wanted to do was really highlight the need to incorporate uncertainty within various data sets and analyses specifically. And so that's one of the things that I did here. So this is a zoom in to the data layer. Okay, great. So a lot of our land cover data, you know, look nice, but of course there's a lot of uncertainty. So back to Dan's point about, you know your data and screen out various points, etc., but also try to incorporate uncertainty into that. And so that's what I've done throughout that global project. And you know, that's there are a whole number of challenges there, and I could elaborate on that as well. But the basic idea here is that we're doing computation. These computations, you know, I would never be able to do it on a laptop or you know, one of my computers here at home. Massive ability to scale up. I think a really powerful thing is about sharing and publishing. So, so for example, if you all said, you know, well, how did you build that map? Well, here's the code right here, and then you could rerun it here and now. I mean, that's just phenomenal in my mind. That's a game changer. It is also to the point of reproducibility and sort of science around it, being able to share that, back up your publications, but also be able to share the information more wildly too. Why not? One of the things that we did was originally we put together this online application actually to help provide that information to reviewers, and then we just rounded that out. You know, how do you convey to people the quality of the data and the attention that we took and people need to take around these data sets. It's really just you know, super powerful way to do this. Building this up through these apps took about a couple hours of my time, and I didn't really have much background in it. So super powerful way of going about it. I did want to mention to the point of especially Google Earth Engine materials, this platform have just launched sort of a soft launch of the some materials for learning Google Earth Engine. And so please take a look at it, and I'd love to have any feedback that you all have regarding any of this information. So anyway, really a quick summary. Earth Engine is incredibly transformative. I think it is powerful in the ability to do things, but it's powerful in reinforcing our ability to think about GIS, remote sensing, and really to be able to scale up in really powerful ways and to have much more of an impact reaching out to folks. So I'll close with that, and great to see everyone.
Great, thanks so much, Dave. That was just really fascinating and really interesting. Yeah, we have another project we've been working on that we've used the global human settlement layer quite a bit, and that's just an amazing data set to mess around with and find that availability. Just an update on Jasmine very quickly here. Apparently her internet on her whole street and her building went out. So if she can get back, she'll be back. But you know, we know these things happen. With that in mind, we've got a few minutes here that we have our speed story folks. Does anyone have any follow-up questions for them while we've got a moment here? You can type in the chat or oh, someone's raised their hand. Mary, I'm gonna let you say something. You should be able to unmute.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. So I really liked your presentation, both Dan and Dave, and thank you guys for that. I did have a question about Google Earth Engine. I took GIS and remote sensing, but we didn't really cover a lot of material on Google Earth Engine. And so I was wondering, for students who wanted to learn more, do you know of some good resources or ways that we can learn about it?
Yeah, well, I think that, you know, both on the Google Earth Engine platform, there's a fair amount of tutorial information there. There's a very active educational kind of group that has emerged out of some of the Geo for Good summits, if you will. And then just to mention again, I am developing some materials. Some of them are on that Patreon website that I showed there. And yeah, and I think that there's that. I believe that Dan has also done some training with Earth Engine as well. Dan?
Yeah, Mary, I can definitely get you. There's some tutorials hosted up on the GDPE, the Graduate Degree Program in Ecology website, which is a great place to start.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, I'm going to lower your hand, Mary. Okay, other questions or comments for our speakers?
I was just going to mention the reference that Dan just mentioned about the GDPE hosted GEE resources. I put the link in the chat for that.
Excellent. Thank you. So both of you told, you know, really interesting spatial stories. So in thinking about these spatial stories, what might be your recommendation to people as they are wanting to be able to develop ways to share information in different ways? what is your approach to thinking about putting this together, and what might be some, discoveries you made as you're doing things differently? What made you discover that, and what are your suggestions maybe to someone else who would do something similar?
Dan, you want to go ahead? I'm not passing.
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. So something I've really learned in large part from working with this bigger group of plant breeders and seed conservationists, it just helps so much when they have something that they can engage with in their own terms. So we're trying to deliver information as best we can, where there is some type of interactive component, where they can get on the map and they can click around and they can look at the data without you hovering over them or blowing through things that are super basic for you that are not for the rest of the world. So I think if you can give them that option, that can really help convey your message. They have to want to look at it too. But
yeah. Building on what Dan says, I think that really important to be able to provide, low barrier kinds of platforms to be able to engage them. So another really nice thing about Earth Engine is it's web-based, and you don't have to have a supercomputer, and you don't have all those hassles of installing software. I mean, God, I haven't thought about, the day in July when the ARC license, have to be renewed, and, my worry about, am I going to be able to get work done for the next week or whatever. So that's really powerful. The second piece is providing a platform that allows those folks to be interacting and providing their own data. I think is super critical. We've had lots of success where, you build out a model and you present a map to people and they go, okay, great. I don't understand your data. I don't understand what's going behind here. And then as soon as this sort of gets to Greg's, citizen science and other aspects there of, okay, now you can engage them and they can add their data to it. Instantly you have changed their perspective and their involvement, and the quality of your data and the insights. So not only from the rigor of the science, but also the involvement and the enrichment of those people, and sort of stakeholders, turn them from stakeholders, reluctant stakeholders, to sort of champions of your analyses. And so I just think that that's really phenomenal to be able to do that. It's really, opening up and enriching our analyses in our world, and trying to connect with other people. So it's great.
Yeah, I really appreciate those comments. I mean, I think a theme that's gone through the sessions today is this thought that we're in a transformational moment. I mean, all the RFPs are always calling for, transformational science, and that now we're actually living a transformational moment. So how do we really capture that and figure out how best to be able to share that, and to understand our data in a way that is also different, and that we're interpreting things differently. And so going all the way back to the early part of our session today with Matt's data, and all the things that he was pulling together from the Aquasat and the Landsat and all the different data sets that are all of a sudden pulled together, that can tell these amazing stories that we were never able to do before. We always told stories, but we told different kinds of stories. And now we're into an arena where we get to tell new kinds of stories. And I think that's really interesting. You're new storytellers that we've never had before. And I think this is an exciting moment. So I want to thank you very much, so much today for joining us virtually. And, hopefully someday we'll all get to be in the same room and have a session and be able to talk and have a beer and, really enjoy each other's company. I think we'll be so excited to do that again. So thank you very much. And now we're on to our next session for the day. And Dave, be sure and get a hold of me so we can have a follow-up chat. Okay.
Absolutely.
So,
thanks so much.
thank you, guys. So our next speaker, and potentially Jasmine may get back on, and if she does, we'll accommodate her in some way.